Very much, Max. It's great to be back here with World Forum Disrupt. I think it's the sixth time I've done a moderation of these panels. It's been wonderful conversations, all of them. Today's topic is going to be cloud financial management. But before we get into the description of what we're going to cover there, I'd like to go through and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And I will start from my right. And Mark, would you go ahead, name, title, org?
Yes, hi, my name is Mark Hahn, and I am Director of Cloud Strategies and DevOps for Cyber Global. We're a consultancy, nationwide and international consultancy, lots of clients, and I'm responsible for all things related to software velocity for our practice. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Sasha. Sasha? Can Sasha hear us? Drop off. Yeah, we'll come back. Uday.
Thanks, James. Hey, my name is Uday Nagwalansha. I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area. I work for a company called Microfocus. Probably a lot of people don't know, but it is a spin-off from Hewlett Packard Software. We became Microfocus a few years back. And what I do in Microfocus is I'm head of cloud operations and strategy and FinOps. We basically answer the question, which workload should go to cloud, which should not. And the workloads which go to cloud, we try to manage the cost and as well as optimize them by applying various techniques. That's what we do at a very, very high level. Thank you,
Uday. Sasha, can you hear us now?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I just kicked off my internet connection. So my name is Sascha Kurt. I'm working for the OLX Group. I'm based out of Germany, Berlin, and I'm heading the Cloud Economics and Governance department in there. And the ones I just saw here, the majority is coming from the US. You may know Let Go. This is one of our facilities in there. And the ones from India will know OLX for sure. And basically, I'm also with the team responsible for all the vendor management, not only for the cloud, but especially for the cloud, which is one of the main topics, I guess, in here.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And last but not least, Rahul.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rahul Subramaniam. I'm the CEO at DevFactory. We are a part of a larger group of 140 different companies within our broader portfolio. I also play the role of CTO there. And I also run a small portfolio within it for dev-specific products like Engineer and ScaleArc and CloudFix. We run a very large-scale cloud operation. We are all cloud. And we run tens of thousands of AWS accounts that we have to manage and manage costs around them. So we've been doing this for the last 13, 14 years. So learned a few tricks about how to manage it, but keen to learn more and share more today.
Indeed. That's great. Thanks, everybody. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as a brief overview, I think it's not lost on everybody here that even before the pandemic and most notably acutely during the pandemic, cloud growth has been through the roof. It's been just tremendous. And I think, you know, from a practical perspective, moving to the cloud is one thing, moving your applications, your infrastructure and the like. I think once we've done that, we have to figure out then how we're going to manage the logistics of these parts of the cloud from a financial and governance perspective. I mean, when we're all in a traditional on-premise environment, it was a little more contained, a little more easy to forecast costs, forecast usage, et cetera, because we had more or less total control of these environments. But now moving to a cloud or even a hybrid cloud environment, these are obviously going to bring new challenges as we start to deal with elastic usage, ephemeral usage of cloud elements and artifacts. And so I think one of the things that we're going to be looking at through this discussion is what trends are we seeing from a solution perspective, from a process perspective, who should own the role of cloud financial management and cloud utilization management? Is it ops? Is it dev? Is it a combination of both? Is it a financial arm of our organizations? As well as good practical tips, practices, tricks, if you will, to get a better handle on our cloud environments from a governance, provenance, financial management perspective. So with that, I'd like to start with Uday and ask him a question to kind of kick us off here. Uday, what are some of the trends that you are seeing in the market in terms of cloud infrastructure, cost management, cloud financial management, any types of process automation, anything like that that can help us get a control on, how we're managing our costs when we're both moving to the cloud and in the cloud?
Absolutely. So one of the common trends that we are seeing is, especially during the last 1 year when the pandemic kicked in, and our common thing is compute savings has been going down. So people have realized the importance of FinOps, having a standardized process and having common techniques to save costs. And as a result of these common things, what we have seen is the compute costs are going down. Even the spend is going up, but the rate of compute costs is going down. So people are adopting more towards the reserved instances and towards the compute savings plans, various items. And they've also realized that a dedicated team or a dedicated person is required in the organizations. So if you have to say, one of the common things happening in the last 1 year is having a designated team or a person taking care of the cloud FinOps, and coming up with a common standard policies or a governance process around saving costs, not only saving costs, but also managing the costs around it, making it more visibility. So visibility and optimization has taken the front role, and a dedicated team is working towards managing the financial costs.
Some great insight. One of the things I picked up from there is you feel that role in terms of financial ops, you call it FinOps, should be segregated and separate from the rest of the team, or can it be somebody that may have subject matter expertise in the cloud from a technical, hands-on, rubber on the road perspective, or somebody that should be parallel to that person and just basically guide them in terms of cost management, or to be kind of like a check and balance against that person? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so more and more people I talk to in the community, what I've noticed is they wanted to have a dedicated person, and that dedicated person is preferably a technical person, and as well as a financial person who understands both the worlds. And that person is driving the initiation, driving all the aspects of cloud FinOps. Not only talking to the engineers on how to optimize it, making sure that the cost is part of their engineering, cost is part of their architectural building, and at the same time interfacing with the finance people and the procurement people. So this is more and more becoming a trend. And if you look at the number of job postings on LinkedIn or Indeed, the number of postings really went up in the last 6 months about probably looking for a cloud FinOps analyst or looking at cost optimization analyst. You see these keywords popping up more in the last 6 months.
Wow, I didn't even realize that they'd codified such a thing into a job description. So that's pretty amazing. Great insight. Thank you so much, Uday. I'd like to next go to Sasha. Sasha, along these same lines, is this what you're seeing from your perspective in terms of managing your cloud environment, from that perspective?
Yeah. So first of all, I would totally second what Uday just said. Like if you think about the complexity of this role, you won't be the one who's going to actually change a machine in there. You are more there for kind of guidance, to talk to the system engineering teams, to DevOps teams, whatever you have in place in there, and provide them the visibility they need, because of quite often it's falsely understood that engineering folks don't care about money. Actually, they quite often care way more about money than any financial person. And the odd thing is only if, let's say, with the lack of understanding of what technology is actually meant for, pure numbers are going to be driven down, like, hey, you need to reduce your invoice by 20%. This means nothing to an engineer, right? But if you talk about real engineering capacity, optimization, model potential, and so on, this is what I'm seeing on every day. You need to have a person where a specific trust level is there, where you can talk tech, so to speak, and this person also can actually be the bridge towards business, towards finance, and also somewhat understand what they are actually having in mind and being the glue between all these parties in there.
It sounds like we're on the first steps to bridging that technical risk gap that we've had from a security measure as well, because it's very, very difficult to kind of translate that, not just the operations of cloud, but also any other risks from a translation perspective.
Yep.
could be made into a fiduciary type explanation, and hopefully when it finally ends up in the finance area, vis-a-vis your FinOps expert.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're getting closer.
Yeah. So the way I see it is actually, at the end of the day, the finance team is giving you a kind of a guardrail, right? This is our budget. As long as we grow this amount, then this is the money you can spend, and hopefully you're going to spend this in a wisely way. And for this, I think the main focus is on transparency. So first of all, not having false goals in there, but being clear about what you can spend, and actually also on a, let's say, at least daily granularity of what you actually actively spend. Because of this is in these on-demand worlds, the most important thing, right?
Yeah, very important. All right, great. Thank you so much for your input there.
Hey,
Mark,
I would,
yeah,
leveraging on that same thing. I think when we set up a lot of cloud environments for our clients, the first thing that the people that we talk to at the beginning are the financial guys. As you set up your sort of your root of accounts or your root of organization, it's the finance people that have access to the very top. Now, they're not going to be doing development stuff, but they need to have access to all of the billing reports and so forth. And yes, they'll probably end up having technicians that send to them on a regular basis, but ultimately they have the sort of the yes, no, the full power over the organization, because if you can't pay for it, you shouldn't be building it. So we make sure that the financial people are fully aware and have actual access to the top of the org. So they're getting, they know the path at which how all these financial reports are rolling up, and they're aware. Now, then we have a FinOps person or one of the people on the team is designated to make sure that the daily operations, the daily spend and so forth are all in line. But it starts at the top with the financial people. It's not a technical issue at all. It's a financial issue at the very, very top level.
So Mark, go ahead, Rowan.
I have a slightly differing point over there. I think what the CFO or the CFO's office sets is more like guardrails to say, we don't want you to exceed these costs. Beyond that, they have absolutely no insight or visibility about what the reality in terms of specific costs or spend are going to be. To be honest, even down to the engineering level, they have no clue as to what their services are going to cost, because unlike CapEx, where you had a bill of materials and you knew exactly what you were spending, when it comes to OpEx, everything is so dynamic, everything is elastic, everything scales with load. Most engineering orgs are not trained well enough to make those kind of estimates about exactly what their service is going to do. That, added with the complexity of the sheer number of services and the complexity of pricing. I don't know if any of you have gone through the 147 services that AWS has and the nuanced pricing on every one of those services. If you ask any engineering team to go, figure out how to price their app that they're building on it, they'll just give you ballpark estimates. And more often than not, they are way off. Okay, so I think the sheer size, volume of the services, the complexity of the pricing models by region, by data transfer, by service, like every little service item that you see out of 147 odd that they have now has another 4 or 5 dimensions. Everything from your data transfer cost to your VPC cost to your elastic IPs to you name it, every little thing to your storage has a different price point. And then add the other dimension of regions. It is really, really hard to estimate costs, even though we might tell ourselves, hey, this is awesome. And we've got our estimates down really well. even AWS teams themselves, and I speak to them all the time, they tell me that they struggle to create estimates for their own services that they spend months trying to estimate what the per unit cost is going to be for what they run themselves, right? And so to expect someone who's using a vast number of these cloud services, making estimates is really, really hard. So, we make a lot of attempts to try and organize it in that. I think a lot of the operations are still operating in the old CapEx world, where you're trying to apply mechanisms of the old CapEx model to an OpEx world where now the dimensions of, or the vectors of, analysis are just so vast that you've got to tackle this problem in a completely different way. The mechanism of, hey, I have a finance guard who's sitting there saying, don't spend more than this, that just doesn't apply. If you are a service, OLX, for example, or for any of your customers, or Mark, if your customers suddenly saw one day during, the Christmas season, if they saw a 5x burst in traffic on their site, okay, is the engineering team going to just shut down all their services and say, no, finance told us we're not allowed to spend more than this? That's not going to happen. You're going to let it scale up. You're going to, spend whatever it turns out to be. And you've probably not estimated any of it. That's the reality of the cloud world today.
So if I can jump in here for a second, so to a certain extent I agree, but the interesting thing for me is the way of how the infrastructure management, the service management goes today is fundamentally different than in the past with bare metal data centers. In the past, you had these guardrails of procurement teams purchasing hardware for the next 3 years, all steady grow, and people simply try to make the workload to fit to the environment they have in place. Today, we have this awesome flexibility of going up, going down, changing our mind in terms of what type of technology we are using, all cool in there. And by doing so, the challenge is actually also, as I said before, like the transparency of every team who owns a specific portion of this park in there need to be able at any time to see like not only what the resources they're using, this is something they do anyways, but also what is the cost they are occurring in there. And the challenge in here is actually to translate the cost of production with the income they are generating by providing these services. And if you go to a metric where you say like you want to be in a specific threshold ratio in here, then Christmas peak, Black Friday peak or whatever doesn't matter, because of at this point in time, you also hopefully, if you have a valid business concept, you're increasing your revenues tremendously. And this should be in sync with the costs you're increasing them. And by doing so and making the teams to understand like what is the product they are having there, what is the impact to the company, and giving them transparency.
Oh, it was a great point. What happened? So you froze up.
I think, I think what Sasha was saying is that finance now, particularly IT finance, becomes different. You cut out there, Sasha. Yeah. IT finance becomes a different set of drivers. In the CapEx world, you did finance one way. Now you've got to do IT finance differently, where you're looking at these ratios of what your spend to what your business income is. And for a DevOps guy like me, that's great, is that I've been trying to get my development teams to think, my IT teams to think more about the business, and to get the business team to talk more to the IT guys to come up with solutions that work together. So this is one way that it helps the finance team understand and get involved in talking to the IT teams around what's the new model by which we do this. And it's that ratio that you mentioned. And every day you should be able to know that, we're spending this much, but it's X% of income, and hopefully it's less than 100% of income.
Yeah, but Mark, something kind of resonated there, because from that CapEx to OpEx transition, I think one of the challenges that we had, especially when we were in healthcare, was whenever we wanted to do a capital outlay, I would say for the next fiscal year, we'd have to do a series of capital appropriation requests that had to go to our board's finance committee for review. Now that we're largely out of that game from an infrastructure perspective with cloud, it's a lot different. It's a lot less I think there's a feel of a lot less governance from the board's perspective, because they don't get to see everything, that's 6 to 7 months before we actually start to incur those costs, and they're very forecastable. Whereas, in this environment, we can scale up or down, irregardless of the fact that we may be trending, from a profitability perspective or tracking and matching towards revenue very well. There's still that uncertainty, and I think you're right. I think it's guiding these finance teams to understand the new normal.
Well, I think when you look at that, you did these large CapEx appropriations on a year or two year basis, and the deal was that there was certainty, but it was certainty that you have this square box, you're going to fit into it, right? And now if the business moves and goes somewhere else, you have the flexibility not to have to fit into that square box that you bought a year ago. You can adapt and go forward. So that's the finance teams also have to become adaptable as much as the IT teams are. And that's the new muscle memory that teams are building and going to consultants. I mean, you mentioned early on, I think Uday mentioned that there's now a role of FinOps that you're seeing on Indeed and the job boards. And there are consulting groups around this too that specialize purely in cloud cost optimization. So it's we're not the only guys here struggling with it. You can go rent a consultant for $400 an hour to help you out with it as well.
Wow, that's a good hourly rate. Maybe I should look into it. One quick notice to our attendees, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature within Zoom. We'll get to them towards the end of the session. The one other thing I wanted to throw out there, everybody had great input as to the difficulty in forecasting, both from the expert perspective, the financial perspective in terms of the elasticity of cloud. But in most cases, some of the elements or artifacts in cloud that we've been all talking about are reasonably forecastable, meaning storage, elastic load balancing, elastic IPs, et cetera. How about ephemeral artifacts when we start throwing these in the mix? Serverless, function as a service, which can really throw a lot of wrenches into being able to forecast from any time period. Do you see any incremental challenges from introducing these types of artifacts? Anybody?
I think this in a slightly different way, where I think forecasting is kind of a lost cause because it's dynamic. So as long as you can maintain, like Sasha said, there are guardrails that, okay, I don't want my cost to be at, beyond a certain ratio. What it boils down, I mean, for us specifically, the thing that we obsess about is, are we operating efficiently or not? Okay. Are we operating in the most efficient way? And we have had accounts spending, anywhere from $100,000. In one case, we were brought in to look at somebody who was spending upwards of $500 million a year in cloud. And in all cases, you'd be shocked to find that the resource utilization or the efficiency at which they were operating stuff, there is at least 50% waste in what everybody was operating, at least 50%. And it's shocking. I mean, data centers are way worse, by the way. Our analysis of data centers where the average utilization of a server is less than 2%. But when it comes to cloud spending, even though it's dynamic and elastic and auto-scaling, the waste over there is at least 50%. Okay, and I think that has got to become the focus. How do you get more efficient in terms of how you're utilizing the resources that are there? And that is one of the big challenges on getting efficient.
So Rahul, when you talk about waste, you're talking about capacity that you're provisioning but not using, or are you looking from a different perspective? Because I would assume if folks are reasonably proficient in auto scaling and scaling manually or whatever their resources, they would have an understanding not to go above a specific threshold if they have a decent subject matter understanding of what they're scaling. I
think that it's two dimensions there.
Yeah.
Resource utilization is one part of it. Arbitrage is the other one. Okay. So resource utilization is straightforward. you've got a server, you've provisioned a 24 core machine, you're using 1 core. Like, I'll give you an example. The number of people who run Redis servers, and they basically crank up the number of CPUs because they think they need tons of load. Most of them don't even realize that Redis is single-threaded. So no matter how many cores you throw at it, it's not going to benefit you in any way. Okay, but tons gets wasted because they think, oh, more capacity, I need more CPUs, go get a larger machine. So that's just resource utilization. That's one dimension. The other dimension really is arbitrage, which is there are people who are using older generations of servers on AWS, for example, like the M2s and M3s. Every new generation that AWS comes up with is cheaper, is at least 10% cheaper. But there are still people stuck in the old instance types, they don't move. AWS announced a year ago the fact that they came up with a new instance type called a new storage type called GP3, which allows you to segregate your IOPS and your capacity. And that way you can optimize on both dimensions. If you were stuck on GP2, by default, you just are given GP2s. But to be able to switch to GP3, you need to do 6 steps. But if you went to GP3, you could really control your costs because you can get IOPS where you want IOPS for low storage requirements, or you could increase your storage without increasing your IOPS. And so you didn't have to waste resources on GP2s to meet the same needs. So there are a lot of arbitrage, literally with every service. There are probably 10 points of arbitrage that you could be looking at to optimize your costs. 99% of the people don't even know about that.
And I think you're touching a very important point also on the question about serverless and all these modern technologies in there. And one trend I'm also seeing more or less every day is that people who are tapping into being a system administrator today, being a developer in there, not necessarily have a full understanding of what the cloud actually delivers. So what they can do either using GCP or AWS or whatever you choose. So that's why what we are setting a very high focus on is training the people. And this is not about just getting a certificate to be, hey, I'm the master of. This is actually to make the people understand what is possible in the cloud. And this in combination, again, I will come back to this transparency thing as often as I need, because of this is what I do every day, giving them an overview of what they're using and making sure that they understand what is the footprint of the machines, then they will choose the best path automatically. The only thing, and this is something which people also quite often misunderstand, is a system engineer, a developer, is not sitting there doing nothing and thinking about like, okay, what to do next. They're usually 100% occupied. And the more you go to the 100% threshold of occupation of a human being, then you will run into a lower utilization of all the servers they're using at the end of the day. And if you experience 50% of utilization of EC2 power, then you can be sure your team is 100% fully utilized with creating new features and making blue buttons being green. So this is something you have to level out there as well, in my opinion.
No, that's great, Sasha. I think the other thing when I think of arbitrage, and sorry, Rahul, I don't know if you picked up on this, is also, I think about like the optimizing like the spot market for instances.
Yeah.
Do you think that factors into that?
That too. I mean, there is so much arbitrage out there in the cloud world that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think back to expertise, I completely agree with Sasha. You need tons of expertise, but expertise will just help you identify these arbitrage areas. Implementing them is a whole other ballgame of, like I almost equate fixing your cloud cost issues to the way software development or engineering teams treat technical debt. It's the same thing. No team has time to go clean up everything. It's constantly piling up, and it's just getting worse by the day. At some point, you have to sit and refactor it. But the attitude that every engineering team that I've worked with is, hey, we'll deal with it when it gets really bad. And that's when red flags get raised. Somebody screams. There's one initiative that happens to clean something up, and then it's forgotten all over again. So it's literally like technical debt, and we have to start thinking pretty much the same way about solving our cloud cost issues. which we don't do today. Today, it's more advisory. There are tons of tools out there that will tell you what's wrong. Nobody's there to fix it. It's almost like taking it dead. There are tons of tools that will tell you what's wrong with your code, but nobody's there to fix it for you. Right?
Well, I
and
think
that's where the rubber hits the road for this.
And I think you and Sasha are kind of agreeing in that because your resources are fully utilized, overutilized, now you're incurring technical debt and you have no time to deal with it. If it, Google has the 20% self-interest time, and that's the sort of thing that you've got to do is you've got to let engineers sort of think creatively, give them some slack time to think about let me work today on something that interests me as opposed to something that's the next feature, right? And there's being in a feature factory, and as consultants, we tend to do this, is that our clients definitely want lots of new features. That's what we come to build. But at the same time, it's up to us to work on those things that are sight unseen by the customer, changing the oil in the car, making sure the brake fluid's topped up, right? That's that slack time that engineers have to have so you don't incur technical debt, so you can go work on these things and drive them down. And think about, how do I change my architecture? How can I tweak my architecture in a way so that I can make use of spot instances quickly and get into the arbitrage?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the analogy of the car change and also the slack time. I think that's critical in any kind of project management, right? I mean, you always have to allow for slack. Uday, I'd love to get you involved here with this discussion. I think there is actually, and Mark just mentioned spot instances as part of this, and there was actually a question from the audience. What's your thoughts on an organization using spot instances and the size of that organization? Is it more valuable if they're a larger organization or smaller organization? Sounds like you're in a larger organization. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think spot instances is very unique and it has its own use case. I think it doesn't have to be a large or small organization. If your use case or if your workload supports spot instances, you can save up to 70 to 90% of cost savings on compute. That's absolutely a good idea. I think irrespective of organization size, I think people should definitely go based on the use case. And the spot instance when AWS launched like 3-4 years back, it was very, very low-end feature, but now they have enhanced a lot. And on top of it, there are a lot of third-party tools are available in the market where you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to understand fully. You can use a third-party tool to deploy spot instances and take advantage of that. So absolutely, spot instances and also a lot of things. Talking what Rahul was saying, like it's a lot of things to do, right? There are a lot of things to achieve. So there are a lot of the new trends that I'm noticing in the community is, hey, there's something called, crawl, walk, and run phases. So don't do everything, and nobody has time to do everything. So people are saying, hey, just try to, crawl first, then walk, and then run. So that's also one of the trends I'm seeing. The crawl phase is basically, hey, fix what is easy, low-hanging fruits in your environment. Something like, purchasing reserved instances or purchasing compute savings plans, because that straight away gives you like 30 to 40% of cost savings. And then while this is going on, you can fix the other, medium issues. That's how the approach are taking. So just to answer your question, I think spot instance is a great idea, and anything else which can get you the benefits, compute savings plans or anything is a great idea to start off with.
That's some great insights, especially because I think the general inclination is to go down that direction. Mark, did you want to jump in?
Well, I was just thinking about the fact that, you can, if you are designing your own applications, you can deploy and use spot instances for kind of your testing and so forth. It gets very difficult when you're deploying commercial off-the-shelf applications and their expectations for kind of a much more stable environment. So learning how to deal with that, and also sort of teaching the software supply chain environment how to build software that can be deployed in dynamic environments rather than just, here's a fixed set of hardware you must have at the beginning and forever, is something that the industry is going to have to get used to. And so the commercial off-the-shelf applications kind of throw a monkey wrench into some of the use of dynamic capabilities on the cloud.
Yeah,
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, James. Sorry, I just want to add a little bit to what Uday was saying about the low-hanging fruit. And I generally agree with starting with the low-hanging fruit. I just add a word of caution, specifically around the reserved instances and CRIs and stuff like that. So most people don't get that you actually have to make a 1 to 3 year commitments. 1 to 3 year commitment to get anywhere from 25 to 50% off on your reserved instances. And most people are incapable of predicting their capacity utilization. The other thing to remember that if you're committing to a particular instance type in a particular region for the next 3 years, all the new stuff that's coming down the pipeline with AWS or with Google or with whoever else, you're not going to be able to leverage any of that. They're basically locking you in for that period. There's a similar, all these financial engineering discounts are easy, easier than engineering changes, where you actually have to go down to your engineering team and get them to go do a bunch of this stuff. These are harder. You really need to know it inside out to be able to leverage it. The other common mistake that I see a lot of people making is, especially when they're moving to the cloud for the first time, all the cloud providers will give you all the incentives. If you can predict what your capacity is going to be for the next 3 years, they'll put you in an enterprise discount program. They'll give you anywhere from 5 to 25% discount, depending on how much your spend is, maybe even more. It's completely random, but you can negotiate a great discount rate. I think without fail, I have known everyone who's moved to the cloud and estimated what their utilization is going to be over the next 3 years. I've known every one of them to fail. They've all been very optimistic about what their spend is going to be. They've made commitments to spend over the next 3 years, and they have failed to meet those commitments, in which case they've actually had to pay up that extra delta or have to renegotiate all other deals, which have been extraordinarily painful. So yes, they are easier from an execution standpoint than going and changing stuff in engineering, but you really need to know your stuff around all these financial deals and be very careful about them as you work through them.
Yeah, great point. There's so many. Go ahead, Sasha.
Comment on this spot instance. What Uday just said, it's totally true that it's a very specific use case. You need to be aware that the spot instance can disappear at any time. So basically, Amazon nowadays gives you 3 minutes of advance notice, and then the machine is maybe gone. And this can be utilized as a very good thing as well, because of you're developing a culture of making sure that all the systems are at any time reproducible. You have infrastructure as code, you have an automatic deployment system, because otherwise spot instances will not work. So therefore, this combination of having, let's say, the ground noise covered with reserved instances, very stable footprint in there, going for a long-term commitment, and coming to the point of utilizing spot instances if they are available, because it's also not always true, can save a lot of money and indirectly forces you to apply quite interesting good strategies on how to deploy and how to manage your fleet. So it's a kind of, it's not, I wouldn't see the real value of spot instances in terms of saving money. I would see as an investment into a proper architecture.
Yeah, and to build good habits as well in terms of that. That's excellent, Sasha. Well, I've got another excellent question from the audience. And Mark, I wanted to pose this one to you. How important is meeting with appropriate teams to review usage trends and also adjust forecasting?
So I think it's very important. When when I talk to a lot of my teams, I will often ask my technical teams if they know, what are the key business transactions that are happening in their system, and how many of those happen on a regular basis. On the flip side of that, from a financial perspective, you've got to have, as you're looking at the invoices and so forth for the systems that you run, you need to go meet with those development teams and show them, like, do you know you're spending this much money? Like, this is how it breaks down. Are you guys aware of this? Let's talk through this. I think that's something that's why as Uday mentioned, there's a separate role for this as somebody who can dig in and start asking questions of the technical teams and dig into it from both sides, right? So you get a lot of power when you have, when you get differing viewpoints to come together and have a full discussion. And so when you get the financial people talking to the technology people, absolutely, you're going to come up with some creative ideas. You're going to come up with some engineering solutions and some financial solutions that's going to meet in the middle and give you much better results. And so this is the stuff you need to be able to spend that time. So if you fully booked your IT team to build features, and that IT person comes calling and you say, well, we can't meet with you until 2 months from next Tuesday, then you're not going to take advantage of that. You've got to have some slack time to be able to have these discussions about how is your infrastructure working, and what does it cost you on a regular basis, and what are ways you might be able to go mitigate some of those costs or bring them down, increase your utilization so that you don't need to scale up as much. And understanding what is your utilization, as Raul mentioned, lots of people have no idea that the systems that they've provisioned on their cloud environment are utilized at 2 and 3% of capacity, and you're paying a fixed price for this over time. I ran that analysis for one of my customers and showed them just, they're running a lot of systems in dev, test, and in pre-production environments that they're spending production money on, but utilizing at very low rates. And so we were able to make a lot of adjustments for that made that a lot less expensive for our customer. But these are conversations you've got to have on a regular basis, or you'll never take advantage of these opportunities. You'll just assume that this is what it is and continue to spend that money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, closing the loop and then also reinforcing these principles, very important. So great, Mark. Uday, I'm interested to hear about how it's done in Microfocus. Who are your key contacts? Who are the folks that you're working with, if you have a process to do this as well in terms of forecasting, usage trends, et cetera?
Yeah, good question, James. Thanks for asking me, because this we started at a very, very rudimentary level. We just had a budget, as just Rahul said. People come in, people create accounts, engineering teams spend a lot of money, and we realized after 6 months, oops, this is overspending. This is not what we thought. So we did something called as a top-down approach for budgeting and forecasting that actually really helped. So first thing that we did is we put a budget, like a guardrail around, hey, if you have a product X and it's the budget that you're going to have, like $1 million, let's assume, and in this product we'll have multiple accounts. It could be AWS, Azure, or GCP. You will be using a combination of all the accounts, and then it's $1 million is like North Star. We always accumulate and see where we are going up or down. And the top-down approach is basically we start from the director of that product, and then we trickle down it to the engineers. And then what we do is we constantly check with the engineers. So our first interface is the director or the product owner, and see how is the costs are going up or down. And sometimes costs are going up for a good reason, because there are new customers or new solutions we are providing. And that's a good thing. And we work with the finance team to increase the budget, because you have a valid reason, you have a paying customer, so we increase. And sometimes we notice that engineers are overspending because they forgot about a POC, they forgot to shut down a feature. So we work with, again, engineers to optimize those costs. So in this way, I have 3 interfaces we have developed. One is with the product owners or the product directors, and then the second interface is with the engineers to see if there is any architectural changes or anything that we can right size it, optimize it. And third one is, at the end of all these things, we get the budget and we try to forecast with them and present that data to our financial partners, and they see it, and they can also put it in their book saying that, hey, you know what, next fiscal quarter or next month, this is what we are expecting. So we constantly shuffle around these 3 interfaces. So we constantly trying to predict the forecast. And this also helped us in one big thing. This is the big thing that really helped, is the culture of cost, including cost in engineering anything. Because it's a loop of conversation happening between all the 3 interfaces. our engineers have started, architects have started to change their attitude towards the cost. Oh, okay, you know what? If I'm designing something, I better look at the cost, because I know Uday and his team is going to come back to me and ask me why the cost is going up. So that cost culture has evolved over the years. It didn't come up in a day or two. It took us probably like years to come. So we are fortunately at a mature stage where a lot of people, before they even want to account, they think about the cost and they compare the cost with an on-premises, and they come to me or they come to our team and say, hey, you know what, we have this new project. We want your help to put it in reality.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term behavior modification because it sounds kind of harsh, but feeding off of what you're saying, and Mark, I think you were talking pretty much along the same lines, is it's almost like making it a part of their routine and constantly keeping them focused on the fact that all these things have a cost at the end of the day. And we have to be cognizant of every step of that and find the efficiencies while operating within the guardrails that have been provided. So fantastic input there. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes or so. We've got a great number of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to keep going through here. This is one I'd love to ask everybody. And Sasha, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on using multi-cloud solutions to avoid vendor lock-in and cost, and also for cost leverage, I should add?
I think the short answer to this, it's not going to work.
Oh, come on.
I partially agree to Sasha, what you said, but let's go ahead. I'll have my input, but I'll wait for Sasha to finish.
Go ahead.
So first of all, putting all the eggs into one basket is usually not a good thing. We know, and this is how procurement worked in the past, HP versus Dell, you could simply switch because it's comparable. And on a high level, if you take a look into GCP, Amazon, Azure, whatever, they are comparable on the high level. But the devil is in the detail in here, and the way how you slice and dice. The idea about these clouds is actually to utilize a full ecosystem of software as a service. And each of them has their own traits. Each of them have, Rahul, like you said in the beginning, like if you go to any of them, it's like a cigarette. The first one is for free. Data is for free. No worries in here. But as soon as you are in, it's you cannot simply switch. You train your folks. The engineers you hire and the engineers you train for a specific ecosystem in there. And the worst thing to happen, in my opinion, is actually to have team A using Amazon and team B using GCP, because of then you actually level out on the lowest determinator between both of them. And at the end, you're not gaining anything. On the other hand, and this is the thing where it could work, there are some use cases where you can actually leverage multi-clouds, and one of them is, for example, for an offsite backup. So if you run your main production in AWS, for example, you want to have a real true offsite backup, you use, I don't know, GCP, for example, put the data over there anyways, and you're in secure area, so there nothing can happen in a bad way. And you may end up of having your machine learning model calculation done with Google technologies, which may be better, and running your production load in Amazon, which may be better, you never know. Then this could work as a kind of mixed setup. But generally speaking, as in the past, like having two different data centers and simply being redundant, so to speak, I don't believe this is going to work with more than one cloud provider.
Uday, you wanted to jump in there.
Sure. I mean, just to start off with, when I work with multiple companies, with our customers, and this is something that everybody wants to do it. Like they want to spread their eggs into multiple baskets, and then they end up burning more. Because as Sasha said, first thing is you are actually you have to re-architecture your product to different cloud. So you're spending a lot of time to re-architecture. And then you have to train your teams to support it or probably to engineer it. And at the same time, since you're spreading your eggs, what I have also noticed is you are not taking the benefits of optimization. You're not taking the benefits of, more focusing on the cost and cost optimization in single vendor. So vendor lock-in, if there are some use cases, I see that you should spread your eggs and you should go to the multiple clouds. For instance, we use multi-cloud because the nature, we are a software company and we provide our SaaS applications in multi-cloud because that gives us a fault tolerance or scalability. because there are some regions that Azure exists where AWS does not. So we we have to, and sometimes our customers are using their cloud in GCP, let's assume. So we have to provide our services in GCP. So we can't put in AWS because GCP communication is much easier for me to build a connectivity. So in those use cases, we definitely use our multi-cloud, and we use multiple services. But what we have noticed as with the other customers as well is it's not so bad. Vendor lock-in is became like a very bad word, but it is not as bad as you think. There are advantages of being in a single vendor as well. You can leverage more functionality, or you can actually negotiate a better deal and better support. You can provide better support to your customers as well, because you know the product in and out of one thing. That's what I'm seeing more, in people also getting neutral to the idea of one vendor rather than spreading across. So those are
one quick thing to that, what they said. I'm completely with Sasha and Uday, but I'd go one level extreme and say never do multi-cloud. You will end up spending twice as much. If you're stuck with one cloud, you'd probably save 80% on your costs.
That is really extreme, Rahul.
The thing is that the real value is in moving to the higher order services with these cloud providers. And the whole idea of vendor lock-in comes in from old school procurement thinking. Okay, today when you look at Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, Azure, literally 95% of the world's internet traffic moves through their networks. If one of these companies, you do vendor lock-in, or you're scared of vendor lock-in when you believe that one of these companies is going to go bust. Okay? In today's world, if one of these companies or their networks or their data centers were to go bust for whatever reason, and all of them, like all 28 data centers and regions of AWS, each of which, actually no, it's 28 regions multiplied by 3 availability zones at least, multiplied by at least 3 data centers each. So do that math. If all of those were to go down all at the same time, that's when you have a problem. And then, in those scenarios, the world has bigger problems. Okay, so the likelihood for you to need that kind of, you're talking about probably 100 nines reliability or availability at that point.
Yeah,
you've got better problems. I mean, it's an order of precision that you shouldn't have to care about. So I'd say do one. Don't go with this old school procurement thinking of vendor lock-in. The cloud business is different in that you save tons of costs when you're with one provider, because these guys are constantly reducing costs with these higher order services.
Absolutely.
Unlike monopolies that existed with vendor lock-in in the traditional model.
That's what I was about to add, Rahul. Like in traditional world, you buy a license, when you're using a Microsoft technology or Oracle technologies in the previous world, you're logged in, and every time you have to true up your licenses, your costs go up. That's why, procurement and finance guys say, hey, don't lock into one technology, use a free open source or use this. But that's not true in this cloud world, because as you rightly said, each vendor is trying to reduce the cost as the day goes by. You have a better instance, it's a lower cost, or you have a better storage with lower cost. So eventually the cost will go down. So they understand that, it's scalability, right? So that's what more and more people are noticing. What you just said is correct. I mean, 4 or 5 years back, the common buzzword was, hey, avoid vendor lock-in. But now I'm seeing more and people are open to the idea of, oh, it's okay to be logged into a vendor because I'm getting a great services, and I'm passing on the great services to my customer, and I'm saving some dollars, and I'm passing on those dollars to my customers. So I'm hearing those more and more common nowadays.
Great insight. Mark, did you want anything to add just to wrap this up? We're getting towards the top of the hour.
No, I think the economy is the economics of using cloud is different than the economics of what a data center looked like, and so you've got to adjust to that. We've talked about the myriad of different ways that your processes have to change for that. So yeah, I would just pile on to what Uday and Rahul and Sasha have been saying.
Excellent. Well, folks, we're going to wrap this up, and I want to say this was a fantastic conversation. I certainly learned a lot, and some great insights. And Max, we'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Definitely some actionable takeaways there for our audience. We did record the webinar. For those of you who want to rewatch it or share it, we'll email it out for you tomorrow. And yeah, just want to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers. I know you're super busy, so we do generally appreciate you taking the time to join us and share your insight. Again, thanks to DevGraph who made this possible. If you haven't checked them out, be sure to check them out. And yeah, thanks to the audience for tuning in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great job, all panelists. Fantastic discussion.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.